Again, John Eisha with Rochester Builders. Welcome to our virtual version of our Lumberyard meetings. We have been working with the City of Rochester Building Safety Department for a long time with these meetings. It's a way for inspectors in the department to let our members know where some challenges are out in the field and update on any code changes and just kind of do our best to keep everybody on the same page. A couple things before we start. One, I just want to take the opportunity to thank Gary and the staff at Building Safety. We had some challenges with COVID and getting inspections done. And Gary was very open with his communication as manager of inspections. And I think they did the best they could, as we all have been dealing with the pandemic. So I just wanted to thank Gary on behalf of the office for working with us and doing what they can to get us through. So thanks, Gary.
Thank you, John. As John said, my name is Gary Dutton, manager of the inspection services for the city building safety. On the sideline, I've got Jane Fram and Mike Thiedens from Plan Review. So if I get stumped, I can always refer to them guys because they know it all, so they can help us out. Mike and Jane, do you want to say hi? Can you pop your mute off your mic if it is? Maybe not.
Hello.
Anyway,
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear somebody there. Is that Mike?
Yep, that's me.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for joining in. With that, I want to just say a really quick thank you to RAB and John Eisha also for setting this up and working with us to put together the Lumberyard meetings. Yeah, like John said, it's been a lot of years, and hopefully it's been productive for people when they sit down. I want to thank the contractors with their cooperation. We weren't entering occupied dwellings, helping keep our team safe. We tried to help keep your team safe. We did some virtual inspections, some pictures, and I know some things that probably just dragged, but we appreciate your cooperation out there. And I know like John said, it's not easy. But again, thank you very much for your efforts that you put forth during this whole thing and is ongoing as it continues. I just want to say my typical disclaimer. I'm not going to debate the code today. I'm just going to try to clarify changes that have come along. If you want to debate the code and you're interested in that, you want to get involved with what will be the next code, probably the 2025 or 26. I don't know what they'll call it, but you want to start looking for checking with the Department of Labor and Industry, and that would be your opportunity to help formulate the codes at this point. So again, we aren't going to debate them. We're just going to try to clarify them. Like John said, if you have questions, work through raising your hand. We will do our best to answer them. If we can't, we will get an answer for you later offline and help sort things out. So with that, John, now there we go. All right, I got a virtual donut for you. No calories, so you can help yourself. The beverage, you can have the beverage of your choice, whatever works for you. And I'm not going to tell your boss if you don't tell mine what we're having for a beverage. So the date to remember was March 31st, and a lot has rolled over the dam since then. With that, we introduced a new residential building code in Minnesota, which includes the 2018 International Residential Code, IRC, in Minnesota amendments. The mechanical and fuel gas code came along about a week later on April 6th, and that's the 2018 International Mechanical, IMC, and the fuel gas code, the IFGC, with Minnesota amendments also. The good news, what did not change on March 31st or April 6, 2020 was the Minnesota Residential Energy Code, no change at this point. There is some review going on. Will it change in the future? It's possible. We don't know anything on that yet. The radon code, there was no changes in that also. The electrical code NEC, at this point, the adoption is unknown. And the Minnesota plumbing code, a new adoption is also unknown at this point. But there's more good news yet. The 2020 residential building code has few changes compared to the 2015 residential code. And everybody remembers back when sprinklers started being introduced. Foundation wall insulation changed immensely, braced wall panels. You're not going to see some of them changes. We also introduced a brand new plumbing code. So you're not going to see those kind of changes in the 2020 code, which is good news, especially with the situation at hand with the pandemic. The codes that were adopted were the 2020 Minnesota Building Code, including the 2018 International Residential Code. It became effective on March 31st, like I said. And also we adopted the mechanical and fuel gas codes, which came along a week later. The 2012 International Energy Conservation Code, the IECC, and the Radon Code in Minnesota, Rules 1303.2400, were effective on March 31st with no changes. Where can I purchase the codes? You can go to the Minnesota bookstore. I would even recommend that you go to the International Code Council, the educational section, and buy books that way if you would want to purchase them. The state has worked with ICC to create a 2018 IRC with the Minnesota amendments are now available, and the book has the amendments and the IRC model code portion of it. Where can I find the code? If you want, you can go to the Department of Labor and Industry website, and you'll get a screen that looks just like the one that you're seeing on your screen. And you'll be able to click on any one of those where it says view, and you'll be able to view the code as written with Minnesota amendments at any time. And again, it has all the codes. It goes right down the list of all the codes that are adopted in the Minnesota state building code. So again, I would suggest going to the Department of Labor Industry website and just typing in building code, and you should see a screen just like it's showing on the screen here. What are we going to discuss today? We're going to take a look at the 2018 International Residential Code and the Minnesota amendments. We're going to clarify some new codes and review some existing codes from 2015. The slides in this PowerPoint with a blue text are review and clarification of changes made in 2015 residential code. They're not new to the 2020 Minnesota Building Code. And the surprising thing is you're going to see probably almost more blue than you're going to see black text. So a lot of this we wanted to go over and bring out some points that came along in 2015 and make some clarifications and review, simple as that. We're going to also discuss the 2000 Minnesota Mechanical Code. Not a lot, not real in depth, just hit a couple major points of it. I don't even know how major they are. And the 2020 National Electrical Code, NEC, due to the hearing coming up and the unknown when it will be adopted, I'm going to just kind of power through some of the possible future changes that would probably hit most of more in the residential. Won't get real in depth, but we'll hit a few and we'll go from there. So with that, here we go. The 2018 International Residential Code and Minnesota amendments. This is a review. Minnesota amendment is now included in the IRC that defines the sill height of a window. The lowest portion of the window opening of an operable window measured from the finished floor. This is important for two reasons. One, of course, is the egress sill height, and two, for fall protection. And finally, after many, many years, they actually defined sill height before it was kind of a moving target. Again, another review, ceiling heights and stairway headrooms. Ceiling height requirements depend on main floor new construction, basement new construction, existing basement alteration. And stairway headroom requirements depend on if it's a new or existing building. The main floor new construction is a minimum of 7 foot ceiling height. Basement new construction is also 7 foot ceiling height in habitable areas, hallways, bathrooms, and laundry rooms. Basement non-habitable areas can be 6'8" ceiling height. And that really that limits it to about storage. If you think about it, there's not a lot of other rooms besides what was listed above. Projections in these areas may be a minimum of 6'4" to the bottom of the projection. That would be beams, girders, and ducts. And one of the things that we did run into and have clarified is if you have a hallway in the lower level, a duct runs all the way down the hallway, you drop that ceiling height to 6'4" or under 7 feet, now it is not a projection, and it actually is a lowered ceiling height. So keep in mind, what we'd be thinking of as projections are beams and girders that cross a hallway. This came up some point in the last few years, and we've made a determination that's the difference between a hallway ceiling height and a projection. In existing basement alterations, 6'4" ceiling height and a 6'4" stairway headroom are allowed to be used. And this is mostly for older buildings with 11-course basements, those kind of things, so people could finish them off. A lot of times they were unable to finish them off, and it kind of led to sometimes people doing it on their own without code permits and things. So this kind of cleans that up and gives people a chance to do the job right and have the completed with permits. This is a new diagram in the code. It talks about glazing adjacent to the bottom of stairway landings. It's really not a lot of change from what the code was before, but I think it clarifies where safety glazing must be installed at the bottom of stairways. Simply a 60-inch radius off the bottom points of both edges of the stairway. Anything that falls in that gray area would need to be, and also is less than 36 inches above the floor, would need to be safety glazed. Again, not a change, more of a clarification by adding this diagram to the code. Escape windows in basements. Where there are sleeping rooms in the basement with required emergency escape windows, adjoining basement rooms do not require emergency escape windows. This is pretty straightforward, but sometimes it does come up that when you're designing or thinking about an existing type building, where as soon as you add a bedroom to the basement, of course, it has to have emergency escape and all the proper ladder or height window well for emergency escape. But then none of the other rooms in the basement would require emergency escape. And as you notice, it's a blue. It's just a review. That's not a new requirement. Alterations and repairs to existing basements. An emergency escape window is not required in existing basements undergoing alterations or repairs. So if you're fixing up something that's been water damaged, or there's a family room that's quote unquote finished downstairs, but occupants would like it refreshed and brought it back up, a emergency escape window is not required at that point. Window fall protection. Window sills must be less than 72 inches above the exterior surface, or the lowest portion of the window opening must be a minimum of 36 inches above the finished floor. to not have fall protection. The exception, operable windows shall not allow a passage of a 4-inch sphere, just similar to balusters. If you meet that exception, you would not need fall protection. Here's just a diagram, pretty straightforward. This has never been a lot of problem, but pretty straightforward stuff there. The window fall protection, the second exception, openings not meeting the previous requirements must be provided with window fall protection prevention devices complying with ASTM F2090. And that's when you can't restrict a window, emergency escape window, to only open 4 inches, and you can't make it stationary, then you go to this type of a ASTM F2090, which when activated allows the window to open fully, and then when it's closed, it goes back to only allowing the window to open 4 inches or less. Again, not a lot of problem with this, but it's just something just to kind of refresh our memories on it. Looking at automatic fire sprinkler systems, again, blue text, it's a review. Fire sprinkler system is not required in single families. It wasn't in the 2015 code. 2-family dwellings also not required. 2-unit attached townhomes, when the code first came out in 2015, they were required to be sprinklered. It has since been changed by the state, and some in kind of midstream of the code cycle, they were also deleted, thinking the thought is they're so similar to 2-family dwellings, why should they need to be sprinklered when 2 families wouldn't be? Other townhomes, 3 units attached and more, do require fire sprinklers meeting IRC P2904 or NFPA 13D. There's standalone systems. We don't see those in Rochester in residential applications at all. What we're seeing is the multi-purpose system, which is tied in with the potable water system and acts as a sprinkler system when you get 3 or more attached units. Monoxide alarms, just to review, whenever it contains dwelling contains a fuel fired appliance or has an attached garage, then you must have carbon monoxide detectors, alarms installed within 10 feet of each sleeping room and on every level containing a sleeping room. And the single stage alarms must meet the UL 2034. Most of the time you see a combination smoke detector and carbon monoxide. The one thing that I do want to clarify is there has been a change in the mechanical code that requires carbon monoxide detectors in mechanical areas and mechanical rooms. The only thing is that Minnesota has amended out and said anything that's regulated by the IRC, which is the code that all the single families and 2-family and attached townhomes are regulated by, will follow the IRC code, which is back to what we just talked about. So don't be confused. There was some confusion that we would have to start putting carbon monoxides in mechanical rooms and mechanical areas. If it was a commercial setting, it's a whole different ball game, but we're not addressing that today. So just be aware and I don't think it's been a big problem once we got it clarified, but if it should come up, that's the case. Storm shelters, this section has been deleted by the state of Minnesota. We don't have to address storm shelters in dwelling, any IRC regulated buildings. Solar energy systems, a new section has been added to the IRC pertaining to solar arrays and the placement on roofs addressing wind and roof loading. There is an exception to the roof array pathways that allows the building official and the fire official to opt out of the roof pathway requirements. What that means is there are requirements that where there had to be access for a fire person to get up on the roof and pathways among all the arrays to allow them to get to certain points on the roof to cut holes to fight the fire. Rochester said that they do not go up on roofs. If they do, they have other equipment that they will reach over the roof to deal with that if they need to. So we have opted out of that. But keep in mind, again, you still have to address, of course, the loading on the roof and the wind, making sure that the arrays are secured down, and all the electrical requirements that go with solar energy systems. Jumping on to looking at some foundation items, there was a change that clarified that the 5,000 PSI concrete is only required on dwelling footings. It basically clarified that slabs on grades, deck footings, anything else but a dwelling does not require 5,000 PSI concrete. I don't know how big an issue that was, but it makes sense because it is trying to, the 5,000 PSI concrete mix is trying to resist water and vapor transfer up into the dwelling to the foundation walls and into the dwelling. The 20 gauge clips, 24 on center, connecting the sill to the rim board on daylight and walkout basements has been deleted. And I know there was probably there was a requirement in the code. We worked to get that connection. And I know there was always some question of whether, if you look at the red circle on the slide, if putting clips 24 inches on center was going to stabilize that foundation and tie it together. Well, it's been deleted at this point. So there's a table 404 with some talks about footing sizes and different things. I'm not so much interested in remembering the table. That a lot of that will be done with the designer, but just keep in mind, share this with your concrete contractors, masonry wall contractors. Anchor bolts must be, and I left the word bolts out. I see as many times I've went over this, I just saw that, must be installed within 8 inches of the vertical required reinforcing. Before it said it had to line right with it. So this really gives you 8 inches of variation. Again, I don't know how big of stickler it is, but it's giving the masonry and the concrete wall people, foundation wall people, a little more variation with this to set anchor bolts, which comes in. It's important in the fact that to try to work to get within 1 foot of the end, and make sure you get 2 of them, and small all pieces, those kind of things. So that's where it does kind of come in to give that flexibility. There's also a footnote in there that talks about the sill plate shall be a minimum of 2 by 6. Anchor bolts shall be placed at least 2.5 inches from either edge, and that wouldn't matter what size the plate is. You always have to stay within 2.5 inches from the edge of the sill plate. Kind of going back to if you are using a 2 by 6 sill plate, placing a 1/2 inch anchor bolt, it gets pretty accurate to make sure you're right in the middle of that plate, because a 1/2 inch bolt and 2.5 and 2.5 is pretty much takes up a 2 by 6 plate. Just keep in mind, again, work to keep your plate, your bolt 2.5 inches from either edge of the sill plate. Review foundation wall waterproofing. Any walls enclosing usable space and retaining earth, including crawl spaces, must be waterproofed. The energy code also says that you need to wrap that waterproofing up over the top of the wall, or use a closed cell foam material seal between the top of the foundation wall and the sill plate. Again, making efforts to cut off transfer of moisture and water vapor into the wood walls and into the foundation and into the dwelling. This here, the fire protection of floors, if you look, it's got some black text and it's got some blue text. And the reason for that is the code requirements are the same. On light gauge framing type materials, engineered materials, you need to apply a 1/2-inch gypsum wallboard or 5/8 wood structural panel or equivalent on the underside of the floor materials. And of course, there's some exceptions. And the reason that it's in the black and it has blue, all they did is they changed it in the code. It used to be in the floors section. Now it's moved to Chapter 3, the building planning, kind of near the fire resistive section. Just to kind of go back through, floors over the, if they're protected by a sprinkler, then you don't need to protect these floors. If they're over a crawl space not intended for storage, you wouldn't need to protect them. I don't know that I've ever seen that case. And here's the big one I've highlighted: an aggregate unprotected floor area of less than 80 square feet and fire blocked around the perimeter of that unprotected area. And just to note that fiberglass bats can be used for fire blocking, which seems virtually to be about the case a very high percentage of the time. The other thing where you would not have to protect the floors would be if you're using dimensional lumber or even structural composite lumber, 2x10 nominal dimension or greater. So if you're 2x8s, 2x6s for some reason in an area, but that would still have to be protected. I want to clarify an area here. When you have a duct running, of course, hanging on the ceiling of the basement, which is happens all the time, there's two ways to look at it. One, you could do the listed protection, could be installed above the ductwork, which is kind of a logistics nightmare to get somebody in there, rock it, know where the ductwork's going, and still be able to, for the mechanical person to do their work. Or here's a picture of a furred enclosure protecting the floor as listed above. Then in this case, the furred area would also get wrapped with whatever, most likely 1/2-inch wallboard is what most people would use. Then you would fire block the ends wherever the ductwork, if it goes in and comes back out, you would fire block that with most likely fiberglass. Again, it's fire blocking, it's not fire stopping. Fire stopping is not used in residential construction. Fire stopping is intent to make sure the fire cannot proceed. Fire blocking basically is to slow it down for a certain amount of time, which is not even designated as a certain amount of time. Moving along, the section on decks has been significantly expanded. It has numerous tables and diagrams that talk about footing sizes, post to footing anchoring, deck post size and heights, deck beams, sizing and posts, deck joist spans, and ledger board connections and spacing. It also talks a little bit more about the 700-pound capacity brackets for lateral stabilization. I don't think you'll see that while it's significantly expanded, I don't think you're going to see a lot of difference in the way that decks are constructed in Rochester. It just really helps the designers and definitely homeowners, if they get into the code book, to understand and size out things and design decks, just a lot more information. So like I said, I don't think anyone's probably seen, if you're doing decks, that you've seen any tremendous changes, even though this section has been significantly expanded. The one thing, plastic composite materials must be labeled now with the ASTM D7032. And my understanding is that's mostly fire spread and the fire related, like plastics. Once they get burning, they burn quite well and quite pretty nasty toxic fumes come off them. So, and of course, we're seeing a lot of plastic composite materials. So keep in mind, it must be listed. I would say all the major ones have that listing. When you get to some of the big box stores, it's possible that you'd want to be careful and make sure that they have some kind of documentation that there's a ASTM D7032. The deck lateral load connectors, this diagram that you're looking at here was the one they had in the code book when we started in 2015. I think we all panicked. I'm wondering how in the heck are we going to do that with a threaded rod going through the rim joist, connecting on the inside of a joist and the deck joist on the outside with finished basements, getting things to line up. And I think probably myself, only seen this application, I think once I can remember, maybe twice. And then we soon came on the scene with these lateral connectors, the 750-pound connectors. The code says you need connection to 1,500 pounds in 2 places on the deck. So of course it took 4 total 750-pound capacity connectors. This now is actually included right in the code. That's kind of my point. There has been a change. Connector companies must have got together and it is actually part of the code. So, and that's mostly what we're seeing for the lateral connectors out on decks. Kick-out flashings. Now the code does tell you that it has to be a 2.5-inch leg on the roof. Coming out from the roof. That was always a question when the kickouts first came along. Well, how big's it got to be? You know, I don't really want it sticking out. I'm just going to turn the corner a little bit, and it's kind of questionable if it did the job to divert the water out away from the intersecting wall. I think we've probably all seen at least one of the case where the water ran down the wall and deteriorated the sheathing, that brought along how important the kick-out flashings are. Now it says it needs to be a 2.5-inch leg. Also, the water-resistant barrier shall overlap the flashings not less than 2 inches. So if your water plane underneath your side, and you want to make sure that incidental water gets in there, that it comes down and it does not get in behind the flashing and goes down the flashing and drains out the wall like it's intended. Moving on to the walls a little bit more. Again, there's a table 602, not really intend anybody that they need to memorize that table. It talks about heights of studs, spacing of studs for walls, and all pertaining to how many floors and roof load they're carrying. It's just a couple of footnotes that we wanted to point out are one that's it is a significant change is the number of king studs on each side of an opening. To figure that out, you need to multiply it by half the number of studs that have been omitted in the opening, and then add 1 full height king stud to each side. And that's how many king studs would be needed on each side of an opening. It's similar to wood foundations. That's where I first kind of learned this concept, was when they would have a window or in a wood foundation. You always kind of counted the studs they took out and replace them on half of them on each side. Basically trying to create a type of a build up post that would resist the wind is the thought. So again, you count the number of studs that are no longer full height studs in the 16 or 24 layout, whatever you're using. You cut it in half and you add 1, and that's how you figure full height king studs on each side of an opening. that one's kind of a significant change. Couple other footnotes just to point out, walls with stud heights 12 foot to 24 foot high. Anchor bolts must be spaced no more than 36 inches when supported on a foundation. A lot of cases, maybe with half-high walls, cantilever walls, we wouldn't have spacing of anchor bolts at 36, but most other cases, the anchor bolts are less than that. And again, this is a 12-foot wall to 24 that you're talking about. Just another footnote in this same 602, table 602 that talks about stud heights would be walls with stud heights over 20 feet must have connectors with a 450-pound resistance capacity on top and bottom plate, plate to stud connection. I think both of these footnotes would probably be included in a design. If you're talking about building a wall that's 20 foot high or 24 foot high, the designer's probably going to have some pretty significant notes on the plan, and the framer would need to just go by those and follow through with that, the design on it. It would talk about stud spacing, stud connections, and things like that. But these notes are embedded in this table 602, so we just kind of wanted to bring them up. Braced wall panels, to my end, looking over it, is very minimal changes in the 2018 IRC. The one that I could find was the portal frame with hold downs, the PFH portal frame. Went from a 4,200 pound strap, embedment strap, hold down where the red circle is. It now can be 3,500. Not really a real significant change, not a big saving. Again, we probably saw more portal frames with hold downs early in the game of 2015. I don't know that they're using them very much out there anymore. They found other design methods and other ways to address that type of hold down. It couldn't be used on a masonry wall anyway because it couldn't be embedded in the concrete. Water resistive barrier now has to be included and put on detached buildings. Up till now, if you built a detached garage, you could opt and not put any water resistive barrier on it. I guess they all kind of fall together when you think about it, and the sheathing on a detached building can deteriorate just as well as one on a dwelling. Again, just to mention, I mentioned it earlier, there's no changes in the radon control system. The Minnesota homegrown radon code, it's still either go with a base of 4-inch of rock or use sand and geotextile material. You always have another option of an engineered system signed by an engineer, and designed and signed by an engineer registered in the state of Minnesota. I have yet to see anything in residential that's done with an engineer. And IRC Appendix Q, tiny houses, tiny homes. Probably heard some rumblings regarding this. It is the appendix has been adopted. Appendix Q has been adopted by the state of Minnesota. So we can build tiny homes. I don't look for it to be a big market. Tiny homes, they have to be 400 square feet or less, and that's excluding the loft area, so you can build a loft in them, and you don't count that in the 400 square feet. So that's a 20 by 20 building. I don't see a lot of them being built. They must have a permanent frost-free foundation, and they must meet local zoning requirements. And I think, and as far as sanitation, heat, and everything else, they've got to meet all those requirements. So again, I don't see a lot of call for tiny homes. Maybe different markets around the country, they might be more appealing or a bigger market. The thing that I guess I do kind of caution people as you come familiar with it, and you maybe read on it and you go, well, if I can have a lower guard up on the loft in this tiny home, and I don't have to have the ceiling height up there that I need in a regular IRC dwelling, why can't I borrow some of the things I like and bring them over to a regular dwelling? And then I think that may be where, you know, and it maybe not even in new construction so much, but it might be where it happens in older homes where it might be nice to borrow some of the requirements out of the tiny homes. We'll see where that goes. I'm just going to touch on a couple things here with the mechanical code. There's now a code requirement that a 4-inch dryer duct cannot be installed in a 3.5-inch wall. Basically, it says it can't be deformed. To make it fit inside, it has to be the full 4-inch diameter. So you've either got to, if you're going to run your dryer duct out, you've either got to put it in a 2x6 wall or at least a 2x4 that's furred, whatever it takes to meet that, keep that duct full diameter. There's also a requirement now that the opening for the dryer must be 12 square inches. I don't know that that's ever been a big problem for us. I've looked at the hoods that you see or the terminations that you see here on the screen, all meet the 12.5, and I don't know if there's others out there that are used in other areas that were problems. I don't see it as a big thing. The reason I bring it up is just so that if your siders are putting blocks on the wall for you know, as where the dryer duct will go, be sure that you get one big enough that if somebody's using something smaller that I'm not that aware of, but that's why I bring it up here. Just be aware that you get the proper size flashing block on your siding to cover the dryer vent hood. This is in blue. This is one that we hit up before. I don't know that it's a big problem now, but keep in mind range, the distance from microwaves to cabinets to hoods. Make sure you meet the manufacturer's requirement specifications for the hood or microwave that's above the range. Sometimes the cabinets bring them down, you know, miscalculation or someone doesn't realize it and the cabinet's a little taller above it and pushes that down not to meet the manufacturer's specifications. And hit this one up for a number of years. If you're getting in and your customer's picking out a high-end, nearly commercial, and maybe even is commercial type range or gas range, be sure you find out early in the game what kind it is and what all the installation requirements are so you can get clearances to combustibles. Some of them have some pretty stringent requirements because of the high BTU the burners put out. So like I said, this one here has been popped up quite a few lumber yards. I've used about probably this similar slide or at least commented on it. So just keep in mind if they're going to a high-end gas range to know from the very beginning during framing what the specifications are for that. We'll move into the last end of the presentation, the National Electrical Code. As I mentioned earlier, it was intended to be scheduled to be adopted on July 1st, 2020. It has been delayed. There's a request for a public hearing with the state of Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. At this time, it's unknown if and when the 2020 NEC will be adopted. The following slides are some of the significant changes that were brought to my attention with the electrical inspectors. But I would highly say, as you find out more, we find out more about this code, consult with your electrical contractor. as you see, some of these are significant. I do believe that they will add to the cost of a house. So I'm just going to kind of cruise through them and just kind of open your eyes to some of the potential. Again, at this time, we're using the current NEC that was adopted in 2015. So there's no changes yet. Don't take any of these and get alarmed, but just keep it on your radar. There'll be emergency disconnects required for all dwellings. My understanding is there are panels out there with this is all included right in a system, and so it's not a big hardship that way, but I'm sure that additional costs for these extra devices, and they do need to be readily accessible. Dwelling unit GFCI protection throughout the whole dwelling now, and that doesn't. And if you look at this picture, it's a laundry room. So, and it does include all the washers, dryers, and all other things. So all of a sudden, the GFI protection goes throughout the dwelling unit. And like I said, and my understanding is you can get them, but again, when you start adding that to a dryer or washer that's never had to be GFI protected before, I'm sure there's going to be some additional costs. And GFI protection in the basements, prior to this or at the current time, if it's a finished area with finished floors, GFI is only required around sinks, in bathrooms areas, not throughout the dwelling. It now will be required as if it was an unfinished area and be required throughout the whole basement complete. Islands and peninsulas, basically it's going to come down to more likely more receptacles will be required. You need one receptacle for the first 9 square feet, and then one receptacle for every additional 18 square feet. So again, just more receptacles on islands and peninsulas. This one here is kind of unique. I hope I can even explain it, but if you look on here, the shaded yellow area cannot have any receptacles in it. It's basically 3 feet from the edge of a shower threshold or a tub rim, and 8 feet above each of those. Cannot have a receptacle of any kind in it. It also has an exception that you get into smaller bathrooms, and this is not going to be an easy thing to get a receptacle and still stay out of that zone, but they do give you an exception that you can put it on the wall opposite of the bathtub rim or shower stall threshold, the furthest wall within the room. So, and that's a little bit of interpretation there. So again, this one probably isn't going to add a lot of expense, I don't see, but it is going to add some complication and probably maybe detract from the convenience of where some customers might want a receptacle placed in a bathroom. Ground fault circuit interrupter protection for all outdoor circuits, and showing air conditioners. They're probably the biggest one that will now need GFCI protection. Of course, all other outlets. Now, most personnel receptacles are GFCI protected outside on this area, but the air conditioner is probably going to be the big one. Again, my understanding is that there's products out there, there's devices out there that can do it. It again, just probably additional charge. That's what I've got for today. I don't know, John, have you got any questions?
Yeah, there's one question that was if handouts are going to be available, and we recorded this entire presentation, and once it gets cleaned up with the dead time before we started, it'll get sent out to everybody. And Gary, you can send me the PowerPoint as well, correct?
Yep, absolutely. Be glad to. Yes, and
And
we'll also get it on our website, the PowerPoint now too. So there'll be multiple places where someone could view that.
yeah, you'll want to get it on yours because if they're not a member, they won't see it on mine.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, we'll have it on there. I know everybody's
Uh,
a member, but we'll still put it. All
yeah,
right.
so as you mentioned, the ALJ hearing is later on in August on the electrical code, and the Builders Association of Minnesota has made some suggested changes. And you mentioned cost. One of our builder members told me that their electrician told them, and they don't build a large house either, so $1,500 more to meet the new codes, and on that type of house, which is workforce housing, that's a lot of money. So BAM's working closely on that initiative. The other thing that I find encouraging with the changes is that ceiling height on existing basements, because talking with some of our remodeling contractor members, they couldn't do anything because of that ceiling height. So that's encouraging from some of our affordable housing challenges, as well as if somebody has an expanding family and now they can finish off that basement or put mom and dad in their home instead of nursing home, or somebody can take a roommate in. So that's actually a very encouraging code change.
And just to clarify that John, that is not new. That is a review that came about in the 2015. So it's out there. Just like this, I want to make sure everybody's aware of it in case you get somebody asks you about it and you weren't aware of it. It's nice piece of information.
All right, I haven't seen any other questions pop up. So again, Randy, thanks for your help. I see Randy was out in the audience. So thanks, Randy, for giving Gary the time to participate in this. We appreciate the relationship, and it's after July 4th, and I'm looking forward to to the online stuff. So anyway, thanks for attending, everybody. And once we get things cleaned up, we'll get this information out for you. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, everyone.